Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is Chris Torrence over at Optum with another episode of Semi Related. Today, we have a special guest coming to us from, I believe, the Farmington, Greater Detroit area, Michigan. Is perhaps today is Steve Sykora. So, Steve, thanks for making a little time and joining us today, man. How's it going?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me. Looking forward
And
to it.
am I correct in my assessment of you being in Detroit post NFL draft?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What an event! I tell you, town was hopping for that.
Did you get a chance to go downtown? I saw it looked like I don't know a couple. It looked at least from the aerial shots like the entire Detroit metro area just looked like millions of people ascended for the draft. So it was
Yeah, they set a
KOA.
record. Over 775,000 people. Yeah, formally attended inside the area in which they had the event, and there had to have been another at least million in the surrounding, area and streets. Yeah, that Detroit was rocking. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm in Chicago, so we had our draft here a few years ago, and it was of course in Chicago, so you're used to having a few events here every so often. But I love seeing that in Detroit. I'm hopeful that that really rejuvenates a lot more opportunities for Detroit. And of course, Mother Nature seemed to play nicely during the draft. So that always helps as well for outdoor events. So very cool. Very cool. And you're a Lions fan, I guess, or try to be?
Uh, yeah, to a degree. I had season
Yeah.
tickets when Barry Sanders was around, but that was a while ago.
One of my idols and forever, right? I watched that documentary called Bye Bye Barry and just what a guy. Arguably, right, the greatest running back of all time. So, and I know you got some ties to Ann Arbor. Wow. So, yeah, I mean, talk about a great team there from this last college football season. So
Yeah, it was a
I could
great
talk all
year.
day. Yeah.
Well, I could.
I know. I call it we call it semi related because I don't want to just go in and write down here's a sales pitch or here's something that the same regurgitation of everything else. So
Yeah.
like try
Well,
to
you know
try to
what
make
they say about a Michigan grad, like me. How do you know that somebody went to Michigan? Give them
is
10
it
minutes.
they tell you in the first 5 minutes?
Yeah,
I thought that was
really.
only reserved for Notre Dame grads. So that's
No, no. No.
oh man, too funny. Well, let's kind of take it. Let's kind of let again, Steve. You and I have kind of gotten to chat. First time I think we've actually had I'll say a virtual face to face, but I think for the audience, we can go back to post Ann Arbor years, and like I said before we came on the camera, it looks like you had a pretty impressive and extensive background in this industry. And I ask a lot of folks, and people ask me, right? How do you leave Ann Arbor? I mean, a prestigious academic institution, obviously a great athletic program as well, but how do you say, hey, all right, I got my sheepskin. I'm going into trucking. I think that probably threw a few folks off in your family or friends and your social networks. But what was the intrigue, Steve? Can you give me a little insight on that?
It was really interesting. I was chasing the almighty dollar, graduating. It was funny. This is going back 40 years now. So I'm entering my 40th year in the industry, and I'm
Hey,
extremely passionate
congratulations!
about
Most don't make it that far.
it. Yeah, well, really, what's cool about it is I've learned so much, and every day I learn some more. But what was intriguing to me back then, and really was the hook into me, I interviewed with a few folks from Roadway Express, and
Mhm.
they told a story about people don't realize that, and this is back in the day when malls were ruling everything, right? Everybody
Yeah,
went to the mall,
I
right?
remember.
E-commerce didn't exist at that point in time.
No Amazon.
And,
That's right.
and it's like everything that you buy at a store, everything is delivered by a truck. And really, our entire economy is driven by the commercial transportation industry. And
The
that
backbone of
always
commerce.
intrigued me and struck me. I double majored in school of marketing and finance, but I had this really big, sense to stay close to macroeconomics and what really made the world run, right? And so I joined Roadway Express because it intrigued me. And what was cool about that was Roadway was, I saw so much change there. I started in the early 80s.
Hmm.
You had 200 terminals in the United States at that time. 12 years later, Roadway Express had over 800 terminals throughout the United
Wow.
States, Canada, and in Mexico. And but what I learned there was more important than anything else than the size, right? It was a great company to work for. You talk about process discipline. This is before ISO. This is before, you know, your TQM. They had a manual this thick that you had to go, and the print was real tiny. And
Yeah.
you learned before you actually were hired. You had like a 3 month to 6 month probationary period where you had to learn all the processes, and
Yeah.
and you had to take a test. And if you didn't pass that test, you had to get at least a 70, right, on that test. Guess what? You weren't going to be part of the organization. That's
Wow.
how adamant they were around process discipline and truly understanding and putting the effort in, right? And so that stuck with me in the beginning. And then you learn that you had P&L responsibility. Um, you learned how to sell. You learn how to manage people, both in a union and non-union environment. Completely different, right? So you had to learn how to
Absolutely.
motivate others, when they didn't really want to, do something. You have to figure out a way, right? And you figure out you have to inspire people as opposed to just motivate, and carry that big stick. And so then I learned there was a lot of domestic transportation there. I migrated over to a sister company for a few years,
Hmm.
Viking Freight. Um, and then I moved to another company that had both global and domestic transportation company, and that company is now part of the DHL organization. I learned a tremendous amount there. It was a company called Coglin Logistics. Again, it's part of DHL now.
Hmm.
And, and there I learned everything from freight manipulation and true warehousing. You learned, you had cross-dock
Yeah.
applications with an LTL carrier, but I learned about packaging, learned about air freight and ocean freight, every mode of transportation you can imagine. I learned how to deal with companies from other countries. So we were
Sure.
a global company at that point in time, and so you had to immerse yourself into the culture and understand things were done differently in other countries. And
Absolutely.
and
Still
what
are.
motivated people here in the states didn't necessarily motivate people in other countries, right?
I think that still
So
holds true. Yeah. Yeah.
it still holds true. That's right. And throughout that time, I progressed through my career.
Hmm.
Um, I moved to another company called Schneider National. Everybody knows
Little
about
small
Schneider.
fledgling trucking company up north,
I'm
right?
sorry.
It's a little small fledgling asset based trucking
Yeah, a little
company.
small, asset based,
Spokane, little
a
Bay Area.
company. Yeah, with the kind of the big arms trucks, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but you talk about a company that industry leader, always pushing on the edge of technology, great leadership. Um, with the stewardship of Don Schneider, and then passing the uh, the torch to several other leaders, to their current leadership team of Mark Rourke and
Hmm.
Jim Filter and Aaron Van Zeeland. Fantastic people, fantastic leaders, great organization. Um, and then I left Schneider to take on a few other endeavors. I ran several small companies in the Southeast Michigan area. I went to the Twin Cities and ran a company called Total Logistics there for 3 years.
Hmm.
And at every stop, what was really cool, at least for me, starting at Roadway Express, and back then, technology was not anything that we thought of. Everything was done manually. In fact, it was a big deal when we migrated to moving freight off of a handwritten bill of lading to creating, delivery receipts, right, with the barcode. Oh, gee whiz.
Hmm.
We had a 9-digit pro number with a check digit on the end to make it unique, right? So we learned the importance of why that check digit was important, and what
Yeah.
differentiated it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and but back then we communicated via landline. Okay, well, a
Yeah.
party
I
line.
don't even think the
So we
modern homes even build a landline jack anymore, right?
yeah.
Like,
So I mean, you just think of it. We dialed a 3-digit number, and I was able to talk to a guy in Adelanto, California, or
right.
Toledo, Ohio. Um, we had we had a hub and spoke system. That's been
Right.
LTL, interstate type a
Hmm.
network
Still in
design.
place. Hub and spoke is still a model. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, today. I mean, still companies still
Right.
try to emulate that, right? And so what was interesting about that was this is in the day and age before telecommunications, right?
Hmm.
We Qualcomm, really wasn't injected into the industry until the 90s sometime by Schneider, actually, by the way.
Right. Right.
Um, and it, so we had no idea. We had the last dispatch update through a teletype system, or we would call on the party line our relay coordinators and say, "Hey, when is my brake bulk driver, due to
Right.
arrive? When did he dispatch?" And we knew what the stem time was between terminals, and so you should try to figure that out as you're trying to run your operation and plan, next steps. And this is in the day and age before personal computers. So PCs didn't
Sure.
exist in the business. So now the technology it advances, and we got engaged into rudimentary dispatch systems, and then TMS systems came into play.
Yeah.
Warehouse management systems and freight forwarding systems came into play. Then you started working, when you were engaged in a contract logistics environment, especially in the automotive industry, you're working in your order system for your customer oftentimes, but then you had to have some sort of integration, right, to emulate their system and then bring that information over into your system so you can execute against those orders. And so at every step of the way, new technology was always introduced into the industry, and you had to embrace that, or you were going to drown, right? You had to
Yeah.
learn that. And so what was really cool was at different inflection points in my career, embracing that new technology, whether it was providing input from a business perspective on a warehouse management system, right? What makes sense? How to differentiate between cross-docking freight to pick packing freight to repackaging freight. Okay, moving it from a bulk item into a binnable type scenario and repacking that. How to cube out a container, especially if you're either doing a straight cross dock or you are shipping lots, and then now you had to determine, hey, you had these 17 different package types. How do you optimize to cube in a container? You know, a 20 loading a 20-foot container versus a 40-foot container to move it
Hmm.
overseas. And then if you got really fancy, you loaded it in production line sequence so that as it's unloaded, it could be cross docked and moved directly to the production line, almost in a line sequencing environment. So cool stuff, and
I was good. You've just summarized, roughly 40 years, and we haven't even gotten to where you are now. But just
yeah,
I can't even imagine. And a lot of our younger viewers, this will be a foreign concept of some of the old, you would say antiquated now, but coming up, starting in the mid 80s ish, and seeing that evolution, not just technology, but just an abundance of just all these new variables and just the globalization that you've seen unfold over the course of your career. I love that you've kind of given a lot of great contextual information for folks now that get upset when a piece of technology that could be very minute isn't working as they expected. And then you can go, well, let me tell you what we did in 1985. So they can appreciate those things, right? So I think
oh
it's
yeah,
good. I always love talking to the more senior folks that have been around the block a few times. And Steve, one of the things, you've worn a myriad of different functional hats. And I think I want to highlight that because I like to think on some level, although nowhere near the extent of yourself, but I always wanted to expose myself to every vantage point within the industry, whether I'm working at a shipper, whether I'm at a carrier, a 3PL brokerage, or as a tech vendor, even now, right? And I think that I think it lends itself well to the level of credibility someone like you has, and the anecdotal stories you're able to tell right firsthand because you've been there, you've lived it, you've sat in those seats. So I just want to at least commend you because I think that's often what's missing is the new tech providers come in our industry. Not saying they don't respect the past, but they almost look at it through a lens of how broken is this process, but they don't always really tie it back to just the times and just what was available during those times. And to see the advancement, the evolution of things over the course of your own career, that's got to be just again, how do you encapsulate 40 years into a podcast, right? It's no easy feat. But when you think about, Steve, what are some of what hasn't changed? I'll put it that way. We can talk technology and AI, but
Yeah.
you mentioned process earlier, and I think that's
Uh,
people,
and
process, technology. What
And
hasn't changed?
that's exactly where I was going to go, Chris. What hasn't changed is the fact that technology needs to follow the process, okay, and support the process. The process can't be formed around the technology. And
Right.
what I found, where companies really fall short, especially with there's so many different startups out there because the technology is advancing at such an incredible rate in today's environment. Now, I can't imagine, and I haven't really seen too much of it. I've seen some of it, but AI is just going to really disrupt everything, right? But the concern I have for many companies is chasing that shiny new object. Okay, oh, that sounds great. I want to chase AI. I want to inject that into my business before really truly understanding. Hey, what does that workflow really look like? What is your core objective from an output perspective from your process? And then how is that technology going to then support that process and optimize it? And that hasn't changed over time. It stood true back in the late 80s and 90s when dispatch systems came into play. It stood true as warehouse management systems came into play and got more and more sophisticated, especially with the use of handheld technology,
Mhm.
readers and all that. Um, we haven't even talked about RFID and how that's disrupting everything.
We're
And,
still in the
and
90s somewhere, I think, maybe early
yeah,
2000s.
yeah. But to me, the biggest, if I had to walk away and looking at those 40 years, it's the role of the process design, discipline, because you can have the best technology in the world unless you follow the process as it's designed for the technology to support it. You're going to have gaps.
That's an excellent point. I think that's a fallacy that so many make, and probably have since technology's entered in this space. Steve, do you think some point though it begs the question, like, is the process broken? Do you ever at various points in your career do you ever go back and go, there is no technology? Because if I think there's this underlying assumption that when I sat in the shipper world, right, it's like, is it a systems issue or is it a process issue? And I think sometimes companies take pride in their processes for better or worse, right? And I think I would ask you, I'm sure at various points, right, you've had to bet that question has been brought to the table of
Oh, sure.
maybe the process is broken, right?
Well, sure. And then of course, then you have different influences. Maybe if somebody in leadership decided to pursue a brand new piece of technology and spend a whole lot of money doing so, and they're going to try to make it work as best they can because guess what, their name's on it. You know,
Yeah,
and might not
that
have
is
been the
reality.
optimal solution, right? So yeah, and that's why I said, earlier, it's like, is the technology going to support the business process, and is it going to generate the results that are expected? You're always going to have gaps. You're always going to run into issues that you'll have to mitigate. But that's where the continuous improvement comes into play, right? Either your process continues to improve or the technology continues to improve.
Well, like I think it was Steve Jobs that stated at one point, a powerful quote that I always remember. It's not, this is not an epiphany by any means, but Steve said it best when we can say business processes, but at the end of the day, it's about that customer experience, right? That user experience is tech term, but start with that, then back in the technology. And I think again, to your point earlier, it's like so many companies, tech is very guilty, right? Making assumptions that they understand our industry and the nuance and the tribal knowledge they clearly don't have. And I say that as a tech vendor, right? And that becomes very problematic in trying to force fit that. So I like that you highlight that. You know, there's a very crucial step of making sure you fundamentally understand the business problems, the processes, the culture, the adoption and absorption rate for technologies based on where any organization is in their, call it a digital transformation journey. And often I've said it on several podcasts. I go to conferences a bit. You may be at a few, right? And inevitably you have leadership that attends these and sees the latest AI or large language models. And it's impressive to see, right? But they come back to home base and they're evangelizing. We've got to get involved. We're getting left behind. And inevitably somebody that's the worker bee says, sir, ma'am, all due respect again, this is kind of what we're working with today. So for us to be able to really apply AI, we may have a few other steps we've just bypassed. So let's bring it back down to earth. Is that something you've encountered, Steve, over the course of
Oh
working with?
yeah, you know what, and that's where your controllers and your CFO are your friends. This is where
Yeah,
they'll ask the question, "What's the return on invested capital on this?" And you
of
have to be
course.
realistic. And
Yeah,
you have to look at the biggest challenge at for especially for larger organizations, but the biggest challenge is going through that change management curve.
yeah,
And as disruptive as technology can be, you know, you, there are all sorts of influences. There are environmental and geographic influences. There are cultural influences, right?
sure.
Um, there are leadership influences. Do you have the right type of internal advocates to enable the right type of change to make it happen? And so to encapsulate all that in optimizing your digital transformation, I think is key. You bring up a really good point. Our industry, as much technology as we see with all the conferences that we attend, Chris, as much technology there is out there, our industry is still behind from a digital adoption and transformation perspective.
Why
We're
is that,
still
Steve? What's your, I mean, this is subjective, but you're right. And I think unfortunately, when people think of trucking and our industry as a whole, they easily categorize us as laggards. And there's truth in that. But
well.
why is that?
You have to look at the demographics of fleets and carriers today.
Yeah,
ATA data, there are over 1.3 million fleets in the United States alone. Okay, over 90% of them are 20 power units or less.
right.
So these are small business owners, small to medium-sized business owners, and they're great. They're great at picking up freight and delivering freight. Some of them started out with one truck, two trucks, and they've grown their business. They've lived on the fact that they're providing great service, or they had great relationship management and all that. What they run into is the challenge as they continue to grow. Some of them just don't, flat out they don't know how to run a business real well. They
Sure.
don't
Low
necessarily
barrier of
see the
entry
value
fees. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in going through that digital transformation. They, unless they're forced to, right? So look at what
Right.
the ELD requirements have been. It's forced companies to get in-cab technology,
As a
right?
federal mandate. Yeah, yeah.
As a federal mandate. In order for you to conduct business, you have to be ELD compliant. Um, and that's just one example of being forced to adopt technology. But
And
what
we
if
don't
you're
want to
not?
force, right? The goal is to get people to embrace that, right? Just
You
fundamentally and
need
not
to
mandate.
you need to embrace it. You need to understand that the true value prop. And this is something, this element of change that what I'm doing today, given my background and my passion for this industry, what I'm doing today actually speaks to that. We
Yeah.
we at Bosch have created a platform, and we've not created necessarily a solution that we're selling. We are selling participation on the platform. And we're going to have partners like great companies like Optum that have fantastic solutions for the logistics industry that will reside on our platform for consumption through our platform for a customer base. So the key thing there is, how do the carriers that might need a transportation management system to capture digital transportation orders and be able to assign drivers and equipment to it. How, what company can carriers turn to help them with optimizing their routes so they can deliver things in an efficient manner. Whether they have a multi-stop type a network, or whether they are planning out a week for an over-the-road driver. And so our platform provides all sorts of solutions and products that will every product, quite honestly, that a carrier will need to run their business, we will eventually have on our platform, so that a company can optimize their use of technology. We will even have companies that will help them transition from a change management perspective to fully embrace technology, if they're having trouble doing so.
Yeah, and Steve, I step back for a moment. I think again, I absolutely think that's going to be a key part of today's discussion is Bosch and the logistics operating system (LOS). When a lot of people hear the Bosch name, right, not unfamiliar. I think half my kitchen appliances are Bosch, right? So the brand itself is very familiar. But can you give us a little context into how Bosch is kind of there? There's probably it's like this conglomerate probably that people just assume that when you're looking at appliances, that's the natural association.
Sure.
But when you talk about getting into the logistics side of this with this new LOS product, can you give us like how did that transpire, at least up to your involvement? And can you shed a
Yeah,
little more light on what the
I
objective is
will.
there?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. So, going back almost 3 years now, during the pandemic, um, Bosch, like any other company out there, experienced all sorts of challenges from a global supply chain perspective. And it highlighted all these major problems, right? Driver shortages, increased, skyrocketing total landed costs, customers' expectations. Hey, I, no longer does 4 or 5 day delivery make sense. I want it next day, or I want it same day, right?
Right?
That's what the e-commerce world did to
That's
everything.
right.
Um, there's sustainability pressures, right? Customers wanted proof that you're migrating towards a green environment and helping the environment. So, Bosch, a very large global company. Revenue run rate this year, I believe, is over $110 billion. We have over 453,000 employees as of the end of last year globally.
Ooh, yeah.
453,000 global employees. We're in just about every country. It's just amazing. And
That's
you know,
scale
they're,
on
they're,
another level.
it's obviously the largest company I've ever worked for.
Yeah.
And so given these challenges, and Bosch spending, billions of dollars a year in global supply chain costs, um, they had a team set out to say, hey, how do we address this internally? But more importantly, we're large enough. If we're going to address this internally, I bet you some of the solutions that we come up with will help the industry as well. So a team went out for about 9 months or so and did a bunch of R&D, and they came up with the development of this platform. And as I
Mhm.
described earlier, that brings these products, services, and technology to the platform to help companies in their digital transformation, to help fleets be able to run their business more efficiently. Um, I joined Bosch 2 years ago. I got a call and said, Steve, hey, we have this idea. So think about this. 2.5 years ago, this was an idea.
Wow.
Today, we have a live platform in three global regions. Okay, we're live in India, we're live in Europe, and we're live in North America. And we're in the process of adding partner and solution density to the platform for our customer base to uh, have select those solutions to help them run their business. So every day we're
Steve,
adding
was
more
that
and more solutions.
was this product, this platform rather, was it initially intended during that R&D phase? Was it predicated on Bosch as a global powerhouse not having that in-house, or maybe not that, this a modern stack of sorts? Was Bosch using something internally, or were they outsourcing, insourcing, hybrid? Was the initial goal to say, hey, we just want to take some of this back in house, and in that process decided we're going to build something cool, and then we can also create revenue streams by enabling others in our, whether it's through Bosch or other partners, et cetera, to also leverage the benefits?
Yeah, it really kind of follows Bosch's corporate culture. Okay,
Okay.
and I'll back up a second. Bosch is one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the world. 92% of Bosch is owned by a charity,
I did not
believe it
know
or not.
that. That's the fact of
Eight,
the day right there. I'll remember
eight,
that.
eight, 8% of the company is owned by the Bosch family. Um, and with that, and the founder, Robert Bosch, who founded Bosch,
Mhm.
I think 140 years ago now, almost maybe 130 years ago. I'm not really got to brush
Give or
up on
take.
my
We're speaking of
history,
centuries, so you're close. Yeah.
and but he was so forward thinking,
Yeah.
and
Clearly.
what's amazing to me is the board of management setup, the objective on making a difference in the communities in which we conduct business in, and so following that line of thought. And there's several taglines, that Bosch follows from a culture perspective, but one of them is invented for life. Okay, and that was really about creating a environment in which we have entrepreneurship within the organization, and it's based upon that premise that these leaders that came up with this concept that ultimately contacted me and said, "Hey, Steve, we have this thing. We don't know what to call it, okay, but we know that this involves logistics and technology. We need some help." And so, and it wasn't just me; it was a global team
Sure.
in
Team effort.
India,
Yeah.
in Europe, and in North America. Um, and the team's done a wonderful job in really building out this solution that is going to help this industry tremendously. It's going to be disruptive. It'll take participation, right?
Always.
We have to
Yeah.
have strategic partners in
Hmm.
all of what I would call the value chain elements in every category that a fleet needs to run their business, whether it's maintenance management or transportation management, fleet management with telematics, fuel management, driver management. It could be financing and factoring, whatever they
A
need.
lot of parts.
It,
Yeah.
that will the partners that will reside on the platform have that opportunity to provide their services and offerings through the platform. But more importantly, there's an integration layer that brings it all together and allows that multiple stakeholder collaboration. And that's probably
Hmm.
more important than anything else. It's that secret sauce that makes it all work.
Yeah. I mean, integrations, right? That's where a lot of projects go to die. And there's just, it's a myriad of reasons, right? And, when I think about just that ecosystem, right? And I think that as I talk to folks and what's the future of technology in this industry, I think, you and I are part of some of the older days where it was you might have a one-stop shop or single pane of glass, one source of truth, right? It sounds great as a narrative. When you think about it, and I've worked at a few larger companies myself, and it was almost like, well, are we good? Are we satisfactory in all these different solutions we offer? Are we really great in one area and I think that that's what's changed is there's so many new entrants and call it the COVID boom, the amount of capital poured in our industry. And you see a lot of niche providers, right? Riches in the niches. And I think that they're seeing, what I guess what I want to get to in the question is you mentioned that ecosystem of partnerships. Is that something that all along in this ideation phase for Bosch LOS that you guys had thought about, or was it that question that, oh, do we build it, do we buy it, do we partner? All those discussions are usually relevant earlier on. And did you land at the point where you're saying, hey, there's things fundamentally we're going to do well natively, but we need to make sure we're playing in the sandbox nicely with other partners that may specifically work on one specific area that would be complementary to the platform that you're offering?
Yeah, and it's more of the latter, and so what what we saw was, and we knew, hey, there are hundreds of TMSs out there, right? There are
Yeah.
dozens of fleet, management solutions out there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could go on and on, right?
Sure.
We knew that we weren't going to build the next best mousetrap. We were not going to build the next TMS. That's not our competency area. That do we have a lot of smart people that could do it? Yeah, probably. But again, would there be that return on invested capital to do so? We
That's right.
wanted to really solve industry problems, problems that Bosch experienced, but also the industry problems. How do you best do that? You work with best in class solutions out in the industry. Okay, we work with the Optums, we work with the Geotabs and Samseras, we work with the 10 Streets from a driver management perspective. Um, we extremely important that we leverage best in class, okay, and oftentimes that might be a younger company too, because they
Can
might
be
have a upcoming solution that is the latest and greatest technology,
a lot of smart
uh,
folks
or
out there. Yeah.
or it solves a particular problem that has been an industry problem that hasn't been tackled effectively, right? So optimization, right? Um, the
For
that whole
example,
one to many and many to one thing. You talk about living and breathing it. I lived it. Um,
yeah, don't doubt it. Yeah,
and so the key thing there really is we also saw, and this became more and more evident as we attended more and more association events and conferences. There was this push, more and more of an acceptance in companies existing in other companies' ecosystems and
yeah.
platforms. At first, when we first started this, we saw a lot of companies a little bit resistant to that. Hey, we have our own platform, maybe not.
Very common. Yeah, yeah,
Right, right. There was more of this protectionist, type environment. And then I would say in the last 18 to 20 months, we've seen more and more of this acceptance. No, hey, we need to reside in Geotab's ecosystem, or hey,
sure.
Geotab, they're going to reside in ours, and we're going to reside in 10 Streets, and vice versa. These are companies that have embraced that ecosystem within an ecosystem environment, knowing that partner to partner, that company to company collaboration is really where the secret sauce is. That's really where we're going to be able to enable that the
Great.
industry to move forward.
Well said. So, just for clarification for audience members, is it safe to assume that this platform is primarily catered towards the SMB mid market, maybe some enterprise as well, but mostly asset based carriers, and maybe they have an in house brokerage arm or a multitude of other service offerings. But for Bosch LOS, again, it's primarily directed at these fleets of various sizes that own
I
assets, manage drivers. I just want to try to get clarity on that.
Yeah, yeah. So we will have solutions on there for fleets in any industry and
Okay.
fleets of any size. Where we are starting out, given Bosch's background in the movement of people and the movement of goods, we needed to narrow that focus down a little bit, right? So we're
Okay.
focusing more on the movement of goods. I mean, right?
Right.
The
Right. Right.
area,
Right.
the world of mobility is just so huge. Um, but to be clear, we will have solutions on the platform. We do have solutions on the platform for logistics service providers like
Mhm.
brokers, like
Okay.
freight forwarders. Um, there will be shipper TMSs that will
I was going
reside
to
on,
ask.
on
You
the
have. Yeah.
platform. Okay.
Okay.
But as a starting point, more geared towards fleets and
Mhm.
brokers because of those solutions that are so interrelated, and then shippers that more shippers that would have a private fleet will probably have
Right. Right.
more opportunity to participate. Now, the larger carriers like the Penskes and the JB Hunts and the Schneiders of the world, they have a very large infrastructure that um, they have many of these areas kind of tackled today. But from a targeted environment, there are opportunities for them to participate within our ecosystem as well. There may be one of those large carriers that, not maybe, many of them use third-party capacity, independent contractors to help support their capacity generation needs. Right? They too have carrier management services that they provide those independent contractors, whether it's financing or special fuel discounts or whatever it might be, selling of existing, equipment that they're looking to sell and upgrade their own fleet. Um, they look at Bosch LOS as that opportunity to add additional value for those independent contractors to help keep them in business, because it's to their advantage to keep that capacity healthy. They need that third party capacity to be able to service their customers. And so again, that's just one use case, an example of where even a very large carrier that has a big infrastructure can participate within the ecosystem.
Got it. Steve, where do you think the biggest opportunity, and this is related to, I guess, the platform as well to some extent, but where do you see, again, no crystal ball here, at least not for me. I don't have 40 years. I've got a few, but not you've definitely got a few more miles walked in this space. Where do you see the biggest opportunity? And again, all things considered, I mean, we've seen the market fluctuations, right? I think unfortunately we're seeing there's speculation of we reached the bottom in the current, the landscape of trucking, logistics, supply chain really as a whole. Um, when you all things consider, where do you see again is that what is the next big thing? What's the next big opportunity in your view? And what's realistic, right? Not just what's pie in the sky, theoretical ideas, but what do you from being able to actually implement solutions? Do you any trends that you're seeing? And I know we go to conferences, right? And you hear things, but from your perspective, mixing what's real and what's maybe potentially years down the road, where do you see that opportunity today and maybe a little ways into the future?
Yeah, and I'm not going to speak to one specific solution.
Sure, I'm not asking,
I
just your
No, no,
trend high
no, or one solution category.
level.
I
Okay.
see I see the industry continuing to strive for more and more data. Everybody that you talk to, all the key stakeholders, there's this unending thirst for data, whether it's connected vehicle data, right? I mean, everybody wants to move upstream all the way up to the OEMs to be able to capture that data, right? And
Yes.
and at Bosch, we're in a unique position to be able to enable that, right? Um, but if you really think about having our industry become more and more digitally native, right? It really starts out with the data and how you can capture that data, whether it is the data that you can capture from a transportation order, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's the vehicle data and to be able to capture vehicle health or driver behavior, okay? Whether
Yes.
it's the ability to capture the sustainability efforts in emissions and fuel consumption, whether it's the ability to um, understand your hiring practices and whether you have the right type of retention programs to keep the great drivers that you currently have, or maybe gee whiz, you're on a growth pattern. How do you create the right type of human capital strategy so that you can support your growth pattern? I mean, but it all starts with data, and
Yeah.
I believe that those solutions that can support that thirst for data, regardless of what value chain category it is, and to bring it all together, which is why we're taking that platform approach, because we believe that our integration layer brings it all
Hmm.
together and helps
Well
solve
said.
many of these problems.
Going back to data, I couldn't agree more. I think no matter what your product or service offering, if you're anywhere associated technology, at the end, it's like it's all about the data, right? Like no secret there at the end, right? It's just how you manipulate data, how you use data. Steve, one of the things as I've been in the tech space more recently in my career, a lot of organizations struggle with data accuracy and data integrity, and they're almost this like it's like spring cleaning, right? With master data, like we know we need to do it, but nobody wants to do it. And then the tech vendors come in there and they're only as good as whatever data that they're able to consume, and a lot of it is either incomplete, missing, or just flat out wrong. And that's where things can tend to go sideways. So you've seen it all, I know. How can we there's no standardization a lot, right? There is to some extent, but across the industry, right, there's semantics, there's a lot of organizations that have differing opinions on what data means. And then of course once you get down to it and maybe agree on that, you have to access that data, which can be, we talked integrations, that's a challenge. And then when you do get a hold of it, you start to see a lot of gaps and a lot of things that are off. How do we reconcile? I mean, I look at an organization as Bosch, and I worked at some Fortune companies as well, and it's always that this painstaking process that no one wants to cleanse data and go through that spring cleaning I mentioned. Yet we want to just fast forward to AI and somehow assume that this automation is going to, somehow normalize and make data correct when at the source level, it may be less than perfect, right? It's imperfect by nature. What are your recommendations for organizations that are kind of in that conundrum right now?
Yeah, I mean, here you bring up a great point. At one of the companies I was at, we had a business intelligence team, and always one of the first things that they talked about when we did any kind of engineering analysis, or we came up with a solution design. Yeah, we got to scrub the data, and I'm like,
Right.
oh. I mean, and that was always like the biggest cost of the
Yeah.
um, the solution design really was making the
Right.
data usable. And
Right.
so I guess that's another part of the whole adoption mentality. So when you're large enough now to that you can affect how you manage data and create those standards. Okay, there has to be this discipline to ensure from a process perspective that that data is clean. And so it really starts with the process, I believe, and then how the technology supports that process to ensure that that data is clean or standardized, that you don't have this disparate sources of data. Um, and I go back to now. There's a time period in my career I was at Schneider, but we belonged to a nonprofit organization as well. It was called EPC Global, which is now GS1.
Hmm.
Okay, standard setting global organization, and we did a pilot for the use of RFID technology in a global supply chain. Really cool thing to be involved in, and lasted a number of years. One of the learnings out of that was the need to standardize the data. So how do you take a passive RFID tag and standardize the data that resides in that tag? How do you
Right.
standardize it in an active tag? All right. And then
Right.
how do you collect that data and standardize that? And with all of the disparate systems, if you think of a global supply chain, all of the different companies that would feed into that, how do you create those relationships to connect the dots, so to speak, to have global visibility? You have to be able
Hmm.
to standardize that data.
Do you
You
think
know.
we'll get there, Steve? Do you think that, or do you think people are, I think there's a tendency to look at data and the data privacy and it's proprietary and there's trade advantage of, I think it's a delicate topic. But do you think that the mentality may shift? And that's a great example you gave with the RFID project it takes a village that's willing to work together for the greater good of the industry. And that's my kind of idealistic perspective. But I go back to seeing all this technology that still hits this bottleneck or roadblock around just again the lack of standardization or any form of governance. And I'm not going to say it's a blanket statement, but when you're trying to leverage these really bleeding edge technologies and your master data is severely lacking, like how do you, Steve, if you're at the next ATA or TCA event and you're up there giving a keynote and this is the topic, what is your message to the audience of the owners of these big fleets, or any fleets and shipper community, I mean the entire industry? How do you articulate and evangelize that to try to get everyone on the same page?
Yeah. I mean, hey, what's one thing that's been common, right? Is that organizations, small and large, they don't behave unless the pain to
Yeah.
enable change, unless the pain's great enough. Okay,
Right.
so so what what's going to enable change? Well, in my opinion, number one, companies aren't going to do it if they can't make money. You have to be able to support the return
First.
on invested capital.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not in business to necessarily you know kind of weird for me saying that with Bosch being 92% of a charity. But no, seriously, I mean, we have expectations. We have, hey,
Yeah.
just like any organization, we have to have
Consistent.
return on invested capital, generate the right appropriate, EBIT, um, in order to sustain our growth and objectives. Um, but the end consumer of that data, okay, needs to be able to support that. All
Right.
right. So I'll give you a great example. A very large retail company that starts with a W. What was one of the impetus around this global supply chain project with the use of RFID technology? They wanted everyone in their supply chain to use RFID, okay, because they wanted that data, they wanted that end-to-end visibility. Well, it's fast forward. That was back in 2007. Okay, so how many years ago is that? We still don't have the adoption of that type of technology in a global supply chain that's
Right.
pervasive. Why? Because the cost to serve is too high.
Yeah.
Nobody's necessarily willing to pay for that.
Great point.
So, so until all of the key stakeholders within whatever portion of the supply chain truly embrace the technology, and let's face it, the cost of of being able to enable that technology has dropped dramatically. It used to be that it was $4 per passive RFID tag. Now I think you have it down to about 50 cents, right, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I mean, so the technology advancement has just been tremendous, right? It's There's still not a a positive ROI. Um,
Right.
there might be very specific use cases where there is, okay, but from a global adoption perspective, we're a ways from that.
Well, I think the Gartner Supply Chain Symposium's going on today, this week, and I'd love if I think that just that piece would be in a great keynote topic for that type of audience because I think it resonates with me. So, and it's a very tangible use case with RFID of how that was, it took a village, but there was definitely progress made, and I think there's so many more opportunities if
Oh,
that mindset could only just be come back to that, right? But like you said, it comes down to it's economics, it's unit economics. It's a pretty razor thin margin business, relatively speaking, right?
that's right.
So yeah, I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. And again, I go back to the other variable is the trust element, right? I think if in order to really embrace these things as that village mindset, there has to be a certain level of trust amongst all partners. And I don't know that traditionally in trucking and logistics that's always been the case. It's kind of a dog eat dog and revolving door of who can screw who first, right? And that's unfortunate, but I'm hopeful that the newer generations coming in can help bridge that gap, right? And understand that there is, the rising tide lifts all boats mindset is possible, but it's going to take, a lot of buy-in from the broader industry. So, but well stated. I love people that can give a great tangible example of it as a case, a case study or something along those lines that outlines what success looks like if you're willing to take that leap of faith. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and and it doesn't, and again, there has to be that demonstrated evidence, like you said, that um, that allows that adoption to propagate. But I'm going to go back to what we talked about earlier, and that newer generation that comes into the industry, they really need to understand the business at the ground level. So often do you get folks that come into this industry and they've got a great academic, background. You know, they've gone through the supply chain management school of
Yeah.
XYZ, university. And there are a lot of great ones out there. And they give them a really good background, but they don't know, they haven't gotten that forklift dust in their eyes, ears, and nose. They haven't pounded the cement and understood what it takes to, move stuff with a forklift or load a trailer or a container.
Amen.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something about understanding the business from that ground level to truly figure out, okay, this is how it fits. This is our spot within this workflow and process. And this is how that technology can support that. And I think that's missing oftentimes. We try to jump to the end solution, the end technology, and then backward, plan our way back into the process. And this is where a lot of gaps come into play.
I could not agree more. My first response when I talk to founders thinking about entering this industry or even academics that live in the theoretical labs, right? It's my first question is, can you explain what the back of a 53-foot 102 wide dry van? Can you give me some insight? And they just give you They didn't teach us that. But I always say that's a great place to start. So I like the little sawdust from the forklift and little diesel fumes to keep you keep you engaged, right?
Oh
So
yeah,
I
and
couldn't
then you,
agree more. I think that, but they have to be willing to do that. So I think again, it's all about that being able. I love that the most successful people I'll say in this industry I've encountered are folks like yourself, Steve, that have been ground up. Because there's nothing more visceral than living it and feeling it and sitting in that seat, whether it's a forklift operation or at a cubicle doing more white collar work. But either way, and that's why I go back to all the vantage points you've encountered over the course of 40 years, really does tell a compelling story and gives you street credibility to be able to say, this is not me in theory saying this. It's I've lived it, right? And I think that's the big delineation I try to make with people much smarter than me on paper, right? Their pedigree and did much better on test scores than I did. But I often have to bring it back down to go, there may be some industries that's going to pay off big time. And I'm not saying it can't be taken advantage of in this industry, but if you literally don't have any operational real world experience, I think that there's going to be some painful lessons that you're going to learn, right? Because in theory,
yeah,
they're right. It's like, this is how it should work in theory. And maybe a couple hundred years ago, when this industry got first started underway and that mindset was there, maybe we'd be in a different position, but that is not the case. So again, I always try to evangelize this idea of there's what's, again, theoretically possible, but what is actually feasible and operable based on any given organizations where they are today, right? Because that's where I think things tend to go sideways if you're thinking too far ahead. So I like how again, I can't give you enough respect for having walked that walk and being able to now talk about it intelligently because it's anecdotal. It's nothing you read in a book. You could state countless scenarios and stories of being able to really demonstrate the exact problem that these organizations face. And I think when you engage with them in a boardroom or at the dock, they can smell that out quickly. Like they just know, right? So I think that's going to, tie all this together because I think as Bosch is going to market with this platform, you alone will be able to provide a lot of credibility just on you. So yeah, that's awesome.
yeah. No, appreciate that. And you know what's great about it is that those companies that truly embrace that, okay, guys like me, and there's a lot of them out there. That's an investment in their own business. You know that human
Absolutely.
capital component is extremely important
Yeah.
and can't be understated. So I learned a long time ago. A guy was on the Roadway Express dock. His nickname was Coffee Joe, and
Sounds right.
I was this young, aggressive kid that came out of Michigan, and I was going to be the next CEO
Oh yeah.
and right. And one day I came out and I gave him a bunch of instructions. I think I was on the job for a few months at the time, and then he looked at me and he was like, and just he
Coffee
was
Joe.
from Detroit, but he had like a Bronx accent almost, and
Oh yeah.
he looked, and he looked at me and he said, Steve, you see that mug right here? Yeah, it's my coffee mug. You just keep that filled and keep that coffee pot hot, and then and then come back in a few minutes, and then maybe I'll show you exactly how this is supposed to run. And
That's a good place to start. Yeah.
I learned more in 2 years working with Coffee Joe, and I should say, even though I was his boss, I learned more from him in those 2 years than anything else because he taught me the
Yeah.
business from the ground up.
Well said. Well, I don't think I can top Coffee Joe and that experience you had, Steve. And I know we're probably been talking for an hour, and I know we could talk for a couple more hours, if not days on end. But yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. But yeah, thanks for making a little time today. And yeah, I would say how do folks reach you, Steve, and how can they learn more about Bosch, the LOS platform?
Yeah, I mean, I can be reached at any time. You know, it, it's steven.sykora@us.bosch.com. Our website is www.l-os.com. And you can also inquire there. That'll get to one of our go-to-market experts, and certainly can always reach me through that mechanism as well.
Great, great. Well, on that note, Steve, again, I'll let you run. And thanks again. Really enlightening. And there's definitely some mental notes I've been taking this whole time. And you've validated and reinforce some of my, my notions. And it's always good to catch up with folks like yourself. So again, appreciate the time today.
Great. Chris,
All
enjoyed
right.
it tremendously. Thanks a bunch and have a
Yes,
wonderful day.
sir. Likewise.